What's going on YouTube? It is Texans Takeover back in another video. In today's video, I have another first round mock draft. This is going to be more of my favorite guys in this class rather than doing what I think is best for their team. Obviously, I'm going to try to put fit to team, but at the same time, I'm just going to go with my favorite guys rather than the players that I think that team will make at that position in the draft. Um, you start out with 5 out of the top 6 teams without a head coach going into this draft, so that may change things. The Jets are the only team with the head coach still there. No Pete Carroll for the Raiders. No Gannon for the Cardinals. Obviously, no Callahan for the Titans. That was a while ago. Same with Dayball. And then no Stefanski for the Browns. Other than that, you have no Harbaugh left in Baltimore. There's concerns about Mike McDaniel potentially leaving the Dolphins, and then I believe that's all. Everyone else has a head coach, but going to be an interesting coaching carousel. There'll be a video out about that, what I think is best fit for each team. But for this is just a mock draft, and it's early on in the year, so it's not really going to be too accurate at all. And I think best fit for the Raiders is Fernando Mendoza. One of the best quarterbacks in this class. Pretty much the guy that can make every single throw on the field, can throw intermediate, can throw deep, can throw short. Obviously, short game's the easiest, but going deep seems to be a specialty as well as those in-breaking routes over the middle of the field. Um, yeah, just a really tall, stout quarterback that's going to take hits but still get back up and throw some great balls in there. So I just really like the way Fernando Mendoza plays. He's grown on me a lot. I had Dante Moore as my QB1, but I think Mendoza's slightly beginning to edge it for me. And I do think he ends up in Las Vegas there at the number 1 overall pick. It wasn't too great in Cal, but then transfers to Indiana, shows who he really is as a player, and has been excellent this college football playoff. And I believe plays this weekend. I think Thursday or Friday, something like that. I guess I can see now um, as they play on Friday. So they're the Friday game. Ole Miss and Miami is the Thursday game, but intrigued to see how he does. Playing a good opponent there in Oregon. So it's Dante Moore versus Fernando Mendoza. Second time that this has happened this year. Fernando Mendoza won the first matchup. We'll see if Dante Moore can come back and win the second one. And with the second pick, it is going to be Dante Moore. So QB goes 1 and 2. I think they're two of the best guys in this class overall. Not even just, two of the best quarterbacks. I think they're two of the best players in this class, and then there's a pretty steep drop off at the quarterback position. I think Ty Simpson will go somewhere around the second and third round, but there's no one that really comes close to these two. And I think they go number 1 and 2 because the Jets' offense isn't that bad. You have Olu Fashanu, you have Joe Tippmann, Elijah Vera Tucker potentially coming back from injury, Armin Membu on that front line. So you have a very solid offensive line with Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall there. So you need a couple more receivers there, but you do have 2 first-round picks. So um, you can shore up your quarterback position there with Dante Moore and then get a wide receiver. I do think Brees Hall is probably going to leave. Um, he's going to be a free agent after this year, so I fully expect him to hit the open market. But at the same time, I think Dante Moore coming in, and then potentially running back coming in this draft could be um, leading to some good things from that Jets offense, who showed flashes early on in the year, but that quarterback play was just awful. Um, with starting out with Justin Fields, who looked decent, but then just dropped off a cliff. And then Tyrod Taylor came in, didn't look great. Both got hurt, and then you had Brady Cook, who played and just didn't look great either. So, I think Dante Moore could definitely do some good things there in New York. Moving on though to the Arizona Cardinals, at number 3, I don't know. I don't really know what you go here for any one of these teams in this 3 to 6 category, because there's your 2 quarterbacks, and then um, there's still talent in this draft. Don't get me wrong, but the Cardinals need an offensive line. This is going to be a team that's going to want to move up and get one of their guys at either wide receiver or edge. Um, and it could be the Commanders, but they don't have the draft capital. They don't have a second round pick in this draft. So it's pretty tough here. Cardinals probably want to trade out of this pick, but I don't know who they'd be able to trade with. It could be the Browns, who are trying to move up, get one of the receivers to jump, the Titans and the Giants. So, there's potential there for that to happen. And I guess that's what I'm going to do. I won't make them give up their first round pick. Um, I think, whatever. That's fair. Browns move up to 3. Keep 28. I think they'd probably have to move a next year's second, and then probably this year's third, this year's fourth, something like that. Um, and then a pick swap down the board to move up those spots. But with the number 3 pick, I'm going to have the Cleveland Browns taking Cardinal Tate, keeping the in-state guy in-state, excuse me, and getting a wide receiver there to help out their receiver room that desperately needs a lot of help. Um, you don't know who's going to be playing quarterback for you next year unless you're sticking with Shador. Kevin Stefanski did in fact get fired, so maybe they do lean towards Shador a little bit more headed into next year compared to this one. But one thing you need at number 3 is weapons and offensive line help, and the offensive line are going to be selected down the board in this class. So I think you just address one of your needs there with one of the better players, the smoothest wide receiver in this class, in my opinion, in Cardinal Tate. Moving on to number 4, I think the Titans could go multiple different areas here. Um, I think they could use someone that complements off of Jeffrey Simmons, and for me, I think that's going to be Ruben Bain. I think him and Jeffrey Simmons would be a pretty dominant interior 3, which I believe the Titans will end up running next year, with Jeffrey Simmons and then a true nose tackle and then another edge, which would be Ruben Bain in this case. So kind of a defensive end instead of an edge rusher. Um, and I think Ruben Bain's going to be more suited to that in the NFL with his arm length not being incredibly long. It's supposed to be around 31 to 32, I believe, is what it was reported. So he's going to be playing on the interior in the NFL. And I think he'd be great there in Tennessee if they can find a guy that can play that nose tackle spot that allows Jeffrey Simmons to bump a little bit outside, kind of over the C gap, not on the outside of the tackle. I think you'd have Ruben Bain and Jeffrey Simmons on the C gaps, and then 2 guys that can play on the true edges on the outside tackle. But that's just the way I see it. I think Ruben Bain would be perfect for that, and I think that really fits the Titans' personnel if they were willing to do that heading next year. And then at number 5, with the um, New York Giants, I'm just tempted to go Arvell Reese here. You don't really need an edge rusher, but I think a true linebacker is beginning to be very valuable here, um, especially with, you know, the lack of linebacker play that you have. You Bobby Okereke, and that's about it. And I think Arvell Reese could be a guy that steps in, replaces Nassau, and then allows your defense to move forward with a true Mike in there, or even if you want him to play the will, he could. But a true Mike that's going to flow downfield, very athletic, can even play the edge for you if Abdul Carter is just, again, shaky next year. But you still have Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and then you add Arvell Reese there. That's beginning to be a very good defense. And I think you have a pretty stellar offense there. You could use another wide receiver and a Jordan Tyson or a Makai Lemon. But for this, I think you just bolster your defense and you go Arvell Reese there. If you're a Giants fan, I do really feel for you because you probably want to lose a couple games. So, you're at the number 2 or number 1 overall picks, and then you do get some draft capital. But for some reason, the Giants always just win their last couple games of the season to drop them to 5, to 8, and then they don't get significantly better. But whatever. Moving on to number 6, the Cardinals are back up after trading with the Cleveland Browns there. Um, and for me, this is going to be a little bit of a reach, but I think one of the more fun picks in this draft, and that's going to be Jeremiah Love for me at number 6. Um, I think a guy that's a very very good running back. I think something that they need in their offense to add some explosion because the wide receivers aren't getting separation. Marvin Harrison Jr. is not getting separation. Trey McBride does. Michael Wilson does, but I could see if Marvin Harrison Jr. gets outplayed by Michael Wilson next year being on the trade block and looking to restart his career somewhere. But I think Jeremiah Love's an exceptional back. I think James Conner's aging won't be to the level that he has the last couple of years. You do have Trey Benson there, but I don't think that stops you from drafting Jeremiah Love, in my opinion. If you can get one of the better players in this class, you go out and do it. There's not really a quarterback there unless the Jets or Raiders somehow don't go quarterback, which we fully expect them to, or if Dante Moore goes back to college, then there's debate as to whether or not the Giants, or not the Giants, the Jets will move back or not. But I think Jeremiah Love's one of the best players in this class, and I think he would really help out that Cardinals offense and being more explosive. And I think you can use Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback next year. I don't think he's bad by any means. So, you know, I think you just roll with Brissett, get Jeremiah Love some good experience there in year 1, and then you know let him be that workhorse back year 2 to year 4 on that rookie deal, even year 5. Moving on to the Washington Commanders, there at number 7. Um, you got one of the best edges in this class still available, and that's David Bailey. I think a guy that can get to the quarterback, probably the true edge one, if you don't consider Ruben Bain an edge, which I don't. But I mean, you see his grades; he's incredible. Um, I am thinking of making a spreadsheet of every prospect in the class, all quarterbacks, all running backs, all things considered. Um, Putting their arm length, height, and weight, their background, all that in a spreadsheet and then just share it with anyone who wants it. It'll take a couple weeks, but at the same time, if I am able to make it, then it's just a free spreadsheet for everyone to look at. If they're doing their mock drafts, they want to see a guy's arm length, they want to see their background, they want to see their well, I guess you can't really have in-person interviews with the staff in them, but their interviews that they've done on podcasts, just summaries on their character traits, personalities, and then their game traits as well. So I'm thinking of doing that. Let me know in the comments if that's something that intrigues you to just have at your disposal if you want it. And I'll try to make it as quick as possible, but I also want it to be as detailed as possible. So there's that. But anyway, back to the mock draft here at number 8. I think if you see Jordan Tyson still here as the Saints, I think that's something you could pull the trigger on. Peter Woods is something else you could pull the trigger on if you want to go interior defensive line. A guy with loads of potential to pair with his former teammate, I believe, for 1 year in Brian Brzee. One of the guys that could have gone top 5 in this class, but just didn't pan out this year, and I think his draft stock's falling a slight bit, but at the same time, I think it's definitely something you can consider as the Saints, because you need a lot of help stopping the run and just ultimately defensively, you need a lot of help there. So that's what I'm going to do there at 11. Or not 11, excuse me, number 8. Moving on to number 9 with the Kansas City Chiefs there. I think you need someone that can help take pressure off George Karlaftis. I think teams really honed in on what Karlaftis was doing, and that pass rush just wasn't great in Kansas City this last year. So I think that's something you need to prioritize. If Jeremiah Love's not there, I think if Jeremiah Love's there, that is your pick at the end of the day. But I feel like I've done that so many times that I didn't want to do that this mock draft. And now that we're here at number 9, I'm gonna go with Kendrick Falk here, a guy that can play 3 downs on the edge, stop the run at a high rate, even get to the quarterback decently. If you watch that 2024 tape, got to the quarterback 9 times there. But a really, really good edge rusher, really good frame. I think someone that would really make teams start to game plan away from George Karlaftis and let Karlaftis be back at his best, which he was 2 years ago. Um, so yeah, I think that's a pick that opens up the defense there in Kansas City. And you don't know what Patrick Mahomes' health is going to be next year, so I don't think you're really going all in on offense yet, because again, you don't know when your star quarterback's coming back yet. And then here at 10 with the Cincinnati Bengals, I think this is probably one of the best fits in this class, and that is Caleb Downs. I think you can utilize his versatility for him to play a little bit of linebacker, a little bit of safety there in Cincinnati. And I think you need help across your entire defense because it was just abysmal to begin the season. Got a little bit better as the season went on, but yeah, you need a lot of work there defensively to really be back to where you were when you played the Rams in the Super Bowl. And I think Caleb Downs is a big step in doing so because he's a guy that can play nickel for you, can play 2 high safety for you. I don't know about single high per se, but can play 2 high safety for you and even play as a sub linebacker when uh, you're on your rush downs. I think he's good at that. So yeah, one of the best fits, one of the best players in this class, staying in state. Caleb Downs from Ohio State, staying in Ohio, but just going to Cincinnati. Moving on to number 11, you got the Miami Dolphins, and if Jordan Tyson's here at 11, I think you just pull the trigger all day of the week. You need a wide receiver to pair with Jalen Waddle. I think Jordan Tyson allows Jalen Waddle to play in the slot, and he can play on the outside for you. Your concern is his health, but um, laundry list of injuries shouldn't stop you from drafting someone, in my opinion, especially if they're that talented. A guy that could have gone top 5 if he didn't have the injury history that he did. Sometimes it prohibits teams from drafting a player. Think of Will Johnson last year, but he played like a first-round pick this year, his rookie year. Um, so I think teams will start to kind of trickle away from that and just start going with the guy that they feel is best fit for their franchise. Moving on to number 12 with the Dallas Cowboys, I've gone edge rusher a lot here, but I'm gonna go away from doing that. I think you go with the guy that can, get Kenneth Murray off the field. Really, really good linebacker who plays bigger than a 6'2", 240 or 6'4", 440, 6'4", 240 frame. Sorry, he's not 440. But yeah, plays bigger than that. Really instinctive with the ball, flows down Flows down to the ball a lot, really good against the run, really good in coverage as well. Another Ohio State linebacker, best linebacking core in the nation this year, and that's going to be Sonny Styles for me. You can see his grades. Really good coverage grade, really good run grade. Not really going to pass rush for you all too much, but I think for the Cowboys, you just need a traditional linebacker that can fly around the field. Sonny Styles does that. I know you have Demarion Overshown there, who's a great linebacker, but you just don't know what he is coming back from injury. Couldn't really see what he would be coming back from injury this year because, I mean, at the same time, he's rusty. He's coming back to football after being off for about a year and a half. So there is that. I do think there's a good player in Demarion Overshown, but I do think you need to look at the linebacker position in the draft. And I think Sonny Styles would be a great pick for you. Moving on to number 13, though, with the Los Angeles Rams. I think your pick here is going to be Francis Mauigoa, wherever he is. There he is. Um, I think the best offensive lineman in this class, probably with the tape he's shown in the college football playoff. I said this for a couple weeks now. I think he's going to rise up draft boards throughout the draft process just because of how good he's played against good competition. Um, I think can play right tackle for you in Los Angeles. You're able to stick him out there once Rob Havenstein retires, and then can probably fill in at guard for you this first year. Um, in case you don't re-sign your guys, because I do believe one of their guards is available in free agency. I could be wrong. But then again, a guy that can play right tackle for you, but could also play the inside for a year if Rob Havenstein decides to return after this year. So there is that. I think a great fit there for the Rams at 13. 14 to the Ravens. I'm going to go with the Olavega Ione there at number 14. You just see how bad that guard position is for them on Sunday Night Football there, where Tyler Loop missed a kick to send the Steelers to the playoffs rather than the Ravens, but Cam Hayward was just able to wreak havoc in that game. I think guard's your biggest need headed into this draft, and I think Ione is probably the best at that position. It sucks because I want the Texans to draft him, but I think at 27 we don't really have a shot there as of right now. But yeah, Ione is a great player. I think going to rise up draft boards throughout the draft process as well. 14 may seem a little early for him, but I think O-line's that desperate of a need for the Ravens that they will end up eventually reaching. And they get their guy in Ione, who's a great player, and I don't think it'll be a reach once he goes into the NFL. So there's that. Moving on to the Buccaneers at number 15. This is where my first corner in this draft is going to go. And for me, my cornerback one is Jermon McCoy. I think, Jamel Dean's played great football just when he's there. So maybe you do go Mansour Lane just because Jermon McCoy hasn't played this year. But Jermon McCoy was healthy the last couple games of the season. He just decided to sit out and just he knew he was going to undergo the draft process, so he was just thinking, why would I risk my health coming back when I can just when teams can just use my tape from last year to evaluate me as a player. And let me tell you, that tape from last year shows that he's a top 5 guy in this class. So 15 may feel like a steal for the Buccaneers there, but their defense needs pretty much just like the Bengals to be revitalized. You miss out on the playoffs because the Falcons beat the Saints on the last day of the season. But ultimately, not a bad beat. You really need to look at that roster, really need to fix the holes defensively because they just capitulated at the second half of the year. So, a lot of mixing around needs to happen there in Tampa Bay for them to be a successful team the year afterward, which, in the NFC South, I think they can always compete for their division there. But I think all 4 teams are going to compete for their division there in the NFC South next year, so it'll be a tight division, but I think the Buccaneers, if they're able to successfully mix up their defense, will be able to win that division once again. Moving on to number 16 with the Jets back up. You have a true wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson, and then after that, you don't really know what you have. I talked about this earlier on. You're probably looking at getting a wide receiver to pair with one of the quarterbacks that you draft this year. You don't know if that's going to be Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore. Whoever the Raiders don't go with, that's probably going to be your pick there at number 2. But you have Garrett Wilson, who's going to play the X for you. He's going to be an outside receiver for you. So what you need is a dependable slot receiver. Here at 16, if Mekhi Lemon's there, I think that's probably the best fit in this draft. If he's not available there at 21 for the Steelers, but you look at the grades, he's incredible. Won the Biletnikoff this year. Plays bigger than his 5'11 frame, and I think he's going to be a tremendous pick there at USC or from USC to New York. So traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast, but sticking at the same position, playing the slot wide receiver for the Jets there to complement Garrett Wilson, I think really opens up that offense if he does fall to 16 to the Jets. Here at 17 with the lines, I think offensive line is probably your biggest need and the thing you need to address most. Uh, but also corner Terrion Arnold hasn't played that well. Your defense just hasn't been that great, so that could be something that you look at as well. You've been so injured that it kind of sucks, to be honest, the amount that you've been injured this last year, because I do think you have a solid roster there. I just think that defense needs to be looked at, as well as that offensive line. The offensive line level kind of just capitulated throughout the year. But I think here you could look at Spencer Fano, but I also think you could look at Mansour Lane. And for me, I think O line's a bigger need than corner probably is. And I think there's good enough corners down the board in the second or third round. You'd probably have to trade up for these guys, but a Keith Abney or a Brandon Cisse who might go into the first round that you could look to trade up for. If you're Detroit, I like D'Angelo Ponce. He's just not the biggest. Jalen Kilgore's a guy that could probably come in and do a job for you. See his frame there. Wouldn't be a bad pick by any means, as well as Davison Igbinosun wouldn't be bad for you down the board. So, there's definitely cornerbacks here that you could look at and say, hey, we can go a different direction here in this first round because there's probably a guy that we like down the board, like a Keontae Scott potentially. Good size, good frame, and gonna enter the draft this year with how well he's played for Miami. So there is that. Hasn't allowed a touchdown all year, so there are guys down the board at the corner position, but there's not many true tackles in this class. You got Caleb Tiernan, who I think could play tackle, and then Blake Miller, Nicky Prongos are about it. Isaiah World. So that's my rationale behind taking Spencer Fano, a guy that's going to play that right tackle position for you. Here at 18 with the Minnesota Vikings, I just talked about corner, and I think the Vikings' biggest need is in fact corner. You probably get a lot of people's CB1 because Jermon McCoy didn't play this year. Um, in this class, in Mansour Lane, a guy that gets beat on the deep ball occasionally but has a good frame. A great coverage grade this year, hasn't allowed a touchdown himself. You see those 7 touchdowns, it's a lot of getting burnt. And I think he really shored that up this year at LSU. Was their standout corner, probably their best defensive player throughout this year. So I do think that he will fit right in Minnesota, who desperately need a corner there. At 18, here at 19, I think this is going to seem like a huge reach for some, but I'm actually going to go with CJ Allen here at number 19. I think this is a team that desperately needs a linebacker there to fly around the field. You can see their inability to stop the run in some games, and then their ability to cover the pass over the middle of the field. I think if you get the athlete that CJ Allen is, that you'd really bolster your defense. 6'1", 235, but absolutely flies around the field. Really good at stopping the run. He's decent in coverage too. I think that grade's a little harsh when I was looking at it there. Um, hasn't been the best to end the season, but I think that athleticism alone will get him in the first round. He's a guy that if you coach up is going to be one of the best players in this class. So, I think the Panthers will take a shot on a project there because it's definitely their biggest position of need there at 19. Big reach, but I really like the player that CJ Allen could become, so I'm banking on his potential here at 19. Moving on to 20, the Cowboys have already addressed their linebacker need here. And you look at their other positions of need, running back, there's not anyone. Safety, I really like AJ Halsey's game. I think he could maybe sneak into the top or the later 30s. Emmanuel McNeil Warren can sneak into the second round. But nothing really there. You look at the edge, you look at a guy that can come in and play all 3 downs for you because I think that's what the Cowboys need. I've said that for a while now. And for me, that's going to be R. Mason Thomas. I know this is a huge, huge reach in some people's opinion, but played great this year. Um, and you look at the size; he doesn't look too big, but I think he does have the arm length there. T.J. Parker's another guy that could definitely step in and do a job there. And then if you look at other huge edge rushers, you have L.T. Overton, who's about 6'5", 280. You'd like him to drop down a little bit in weight, though, to come in. But that's going to be my pick there at number 20. I think R. Mason Thomas had a great year for OU. Kind of like a Donovan Ezraku there. And I think Ezraku could get better at stopping the run. And I think if you have 2 of the similar players with how good your interior defensive line is, then it would be scary for opposing defenses to go up against. Moving on to 21, though, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think you're looking at a guy that can come and play that slot receiver. And for me, that's Casey Concepcion. a guy that's been great in the slot. You can see 25 catches for 281 yards in the slot. Had a lot of production elsewhere, but he's really good at getting down the field. He's really good at playing in between the hashes. A really explosive player at that wide receiver position, and I think that's what you desperately need there at Pittsburgh. I'm intrigued to see. I am a Texans fan, so obviously I'm going to be watching our game against the Steelers here in this wild card round, but I am intrigued to see how that Steelers wide receiver core is going to be able to hold up against that Texans secondary. You really got DK Metcalf, and then it feels like there's nothing else besides potentially Calvin Austin or Pratt Freiermuth as your other weapons. But it's dip and dunk. You give it to your running backs, and that's about it. So I think if you're able to bring in an explosive guy in Casey Concepcion, that really opens up your offense. Moving into next year, so that's the rationale behind that pick. Moving on to 22 with the Chargers, I think this is offensive line all the way. And one of my favorite guys is Manuel Pregnon. It feels like, potentially this stretch feels like a little bit of reaches here, but trust me, these are guys that I all really like. And you'll see that if I do end up making that spreadsheet that I talked about earlier on in the video. But yeah, Pregnon's a great, great offensive lineman. Probably uh, the best offensive lineman or interior offensive lineman in college football this year. Has just been consistent. That's all that you can really say. Only allowed one sack this year, and has really, really prevented defensive lines from getting to push on the interior. Really good in the run game, really good in the pass game. Powerful hands. Just doesn't really let people by him. And I think that's what the Chargers need. They really need someone there on that defensive or offensive front to push back the interior defensive lines, which have had so much success against the Chargers this year with Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater being injured that um, I think he's a perfect fit there and will help them going forward. Zion Johnson at left guard and then probably Pregnon at right guard then. Um, but yeah. Moving on to 23 with the Philadelphia Eagles, I am going to go with a boundary corner here because I think they need someone opposite of Quinyon Mitchell to play that boundary position, and that's going to be Colton Hood for me. He's about 6 foot, 195. Just played excellent this year, and I think someone that could go in the first round. Also, a guy that could return to college for his redshirt junior year if he finds a deal that entices him enough to go back to college. But I think he's played himself in the first round of the NFL draft, and I don't understand why a guy would pass that up. So I see him declaring, and I do think the Philadelphia Eagles would be lucky to get him at 23 just because of really how well he's played this year. Probably been the second best corner in college football this year that can potentially play the boundary in the NFL. Avion Terrell was solid, but doesn't really get that many turnovers. Avion Terrell, and also gets beat by bigger receivers just because of his size, his frame. But plays bigger than he is. I think 2 inches shorter than Colton Hood is, but I think Colton Hood has really good technique and just really played well for Tennessee this year. So that's why he is the pick there at number 23. 24, I'm making the same pick I did last time I did a mock draft, I believe. I don't recall, but Denzel Boston's going to be the pick here at 24. A big receiver, 6'4", that can just get down the field, and Josh Allen's going to finally have a deep ball threat that he can throw the ball to. It's going to be Khalil Shakir on the intermediate routes, and then Denzel Boston down the field, which is what Josh Allen has been crying out for years, it feels like. But he finally gets it there with Denzel Boston, and I think that's a great fit there in Buffalo. Not really much explanation needed. Moving on to the Bears at 25, I think this is going to be a guy that can come in and stop the run at a very high rate. And for me, that's Caleb Banks with how powerful his hands are. I think it's going to prove detrimental to, um, you know, the Bears who desperately need someone on that interior defensive line to really stop the run because they've just been unable to as of recent. Um, and we'll see how that inability helps or how much that inability holds him back in the playoffs because you know how much the Packers love to run the ball. If they're able to get Josh Jacobs going, then it could be a completely different ball game than the one that the Bears did end up winning. So yeah, we'll see there, but I think the Bears desperately need to address that in the offseason. If it's not a free agency when there's a lot of serviceable D tackles there, I think they address it in the draft. And if Caleb Banks is there at 25, I think they're stupid not to take him, to be honest. Here at 26 with the San Francisco 49ers, I think you're looking at edge probably because you need someone to pair with Nick Bosa when he comes back from injury. A guy that can play all three downs. I talked about him a little bit earlier. That's TJ Parker. Uh, just one of the guys with one of the frames that can play all three downs, 6'3", 260 with decent arm length. Another one is R. Mason Thomas, a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller, but has good arm length there too. Yeah, I think a guy that would be able to play all three downs for San Francisco. hasn't been amazing this year, but you see how good he was in 2024, 12 sacks, about the same amount of hurries and hits this year. Just wasn't able to get the quarterback down, but played two less games at the same time. But really consistent year for TJ Parker. Didn't really, um, show too many lackluster moments there, even though Clemson was lackluster themselves. Um, and I think you need someone to pair with Nick Bosa on that edge. That's why he's my pick there at 26. 27 with the Houston Texans. I think you're a little upset that both Pregnon and EINA are already gone. Your next best option is Caleb Lomey to play tackle for you on that offensive line if you want, or Jennings Dunker to play on the interior offensive line. Um, a guy that I think will play guard in the NFL. But I'm going to go away from that. I'm going to go with the guy that can really stop the run from the interior, and that is Caden McDonald. I think you really need to look at investing in that defensive line after Tim Settle and Mario Edwards both got hurt. Mario Edwards is a cut candidate. He's going to free up $5 million for you in the offseason, so I think you need to look at bolstering that defensive line. The Texans have a great Ohio State pipeline right now with Cade Stover, C.J. Stroud, even Tommy Togiai playing on the interior defensive line, who has been great and got re-signed for next year. So potentially in interior line with Cade McDonald and Tommy Togiai, two Buckeyes at the heart of it. Moving on to 28 with the Cleveland Browns. Your first pick, you go with Carnell Tate to shore up that wide receiver unit. So it's Cardinal Tate and Jerry Jeudy right now, basically, and then Cedric Tillman or whoever you want to pair with. And I think next up, you need to shore up that offensive line. So Caleb Lomey is going to be my pick, a guy that's going to be able to play tackle in the league. The Utah guys are guys that can play tackle in the league, as well as Francis Mauigoa. Other than that, most tackles are going to end up playing guard. But I think you don't know what the future of your offensive line holds. They're aging. Um, White Teller, Joe Batonio, both aging. So I think you just need guys that can plug and play on that offensive line and really shore that team up because they do really need a lot of help on that front right now. Moving on to the Rams at 29. You go with Mauigoa to begin the draft, and I'm going to go with a guy that's probably a little bit down the board for some, but I really like him in Keith Abney at 29. Got the frame to play the boundary, and I think really replace Emmanuel Forbes. Good for Arizona State this year. I think could sneak into the first round or going to be a high to mid second round pick. But for me, the only other boundary corner here is Brandon Cisse, so I think it's really what the Rams prefer. Um, I like Keith Abney's tape. I've dove into it a little bit more over the last couple of weeks, excuse me. And I'm just going to make the pick there for the Rams at 29. A guy that can play boundary corner, good tape, fluid feet, able to break on the ball pretty quickly. You can see no touchdowns allowed this year. That's consistent with the top corners in college football. You can see how well he graded. I think he's better in zone than he is in man, but then again, I do think the Rams are a team that is able to sit back in zone and just cover with how good um, their blitz packages are at that front is. So I think Keith Abney is a great fit there in Los Angeles, even though they do run a decent amount of man. Moving on to number 30 with the New England Patriots. I like the idea of Cassius Howell going there, but I am going to go Romello Height just because, I think you're looking at frame. Cassius Howell's about the same weight, but it's going to have ridiculously short arms, in my opinion. I think they're going to be similar to, where is he? Ruben Baines' arm length, but at the same time, Cassius Howell can solely play edge in the NFL. I don't think he can play on the interior like Ruben Bain has that flexibility too. So I think teams are going to value that. I think Cassius Howell might fall a little bit, even though he's been great for A&M this year. 12 sacks was great at Purdue as well. Or no, that's Nick Scorton. Sorry, I mixed them up. But yeah, Cassius Howell great at A&M this year. I think someone that's really good at rushing the passer, but that's going to be his only job in the NFL is to rush the passer. And that's valuable. Some teams are really going to value that, but I think the Patriots need someone that can rush the passer as well as stop the run a little bit, and I think Romello Height's decent at both. Obviously, a lot better at rushing the passer than stopping the run. With the 9 sacks there, you can see the amount of hurries he had. Playing alongside a great teammate in David Bailey at the same time too, so you don't know how legitimate that is. But at the same time, Romello Height's a great pass rusher. I think would do great things in New England. At 31, though, with the Denver Broncos, it's Kenyon Sadiq. Every time Kenyon Sadiq's available, he's going to the Broncos. I think could go very early here. I think he could go as early as 15 to the Buccaneers. I think he could go to do you like Mitchell Evans that much? If not, he could go to the Panthers at 19. Um, you know, do you like? I guess you have Gadsden there. He can go replace Dallas Goddard. Other than that, he can go to the Texans and be alongside Dalton Schultz for a year. Um, he can go to the Rams really, and really shore up that tight end group that has a lot of guys running in it right now, but no real standout. And I think Kenyon Sadiq would stand out there. One of my favorite tight end prospects ever, in my opinion, as a receiver. I think this tight end class is actually very solid once you get down the board. I like Michael Trigg. Um, Really good film, really good receiving threat at the tight end position. One of my favorites down the board is Tanner Koziel. Just look at the frame; he's about 6'7", 250. Maybe you want to put on a little bit of weight, but he's such a good receiving threat at that tight end position that I think could go higher than that 164. But anyway, stop ranting. To round out the draft here at 32, I think the Seahawks are going to go with another guard here. And for me, it's going to be Jennings Dunker to round out this draft. A tackle that can play guard, but I think the Seahawks need help on that interior offensive line. You see their matchups against Rams. I think they get dominated a little bit on that front. Um, and yeah, it's going to be my last pick on the draft to really shore up that Seahawks interior offensive line. Um, yeah, this is everything. Let me know what you think about what I did with your team. Um, the two picks you can't see are Makai Lemon and Jennings Dunker, both great players there. So I don't think anyone should be complaining with those two. But let me know if you agree with what I did with your team or not. And if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe. And as always, it's Texans Takeover, and I'm out. Peace.